2009 was a crazy year in the NFL. We had two teams that were 13-0 late in the season fighting for perfection that would end up meeting in the Super Bowl, one of them being the New Orleans Saints, who, after years and years of frustration and losing, finally got to be on top of the world by winning their first and only Super Bowl. But it's also infamous for two teams doing the exact opposite of each other that it's kind of amazing. Now, I am going to split this into two videos and talk about one team in this video and the other team in the next, but basically, if you know anything about the 2009 season outside of the New Orleans Saints and Indianapolis Colts duel of who was going to go undefeated, which, newsflash, neither one of them did, there was a team in the Denver Broncos that were 6-0 and taking the world by storm, while the Tennessee Titans, who were just 13-3 a year ago in 2008, started the season off 0-6. But would you believe me if I told you that both of those teams finished with the exact same record at the end of the year? I mean, yeah, you probably wouldn't believe me, but it happened. The Denver Broncos went from 6-0 to 8-8, and the Tennessee Titans, who were 0-6, almost snuck into the playoffs, winning 8 of their last 10 games and finishing 8-8 themselves. What's interesting is, like I said, how it was the complete opposite with these two franchises during this season. I'm here to talk about the Tennessee Titans season in this video because we may never see a team come this close again to making the playoffs with a start like that. You gotta put this into perspective. The worst winless start to a season for a team that ended up making the playoffs was the 1992 San Diego Chargers, who started that year off 0-4, won 11 of their last 12 games to go 11-5, and make it into the postseason. Other than that, anybody who started 0-5, 0-6, 0-7 has missed out on the playoffs, because basically at that point, you have little to no room for error where you can only lose a game or two, or you can't even lose a game at all. You have to win out, and most of the time when you're winless that late in the season, you're probably not that good of a team to begin with. And with the Titans, something like this wasn't new. Just 3 years prior in 2006, with a old veteran Kerry Collins in his first year with the Titans and a rookie Vince Young, the team started 2-7, but a 6-game win streak brought them to 8-7 in the final week, needing a win and help to get into the playoffs, but they lost to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in Week 17, getting their record to 8-8, missing out on the playoffs. But have no fear, 2007, 2008, they made the playoffs in back-to-back years, and in 2009, they were kind of projected to make the playoffs again, if not win the division, just be a wild card team. To open up the season, they did start out in Pittsburgh against the defending Super Bowl champion Steelers, where they lost 13-10. Okay, no biggie, you're playing the defending champions, a good team, so losing there in week 1, not the end of the world, but before you knew it, they were 0-5, heading into a matchup in New England with Tom Brady and the Patriots, who were just coming off a loss themselves to the Denver Broncos, who again we will talk about in the next video, as they were sitting at 3-2, and you gotta think too, this was also Tom Brady's first year back from his ACL injury, and for the first 5 weeks or so, he was not looking like himself. And the thing about this game was that it was snowing heavily, there was snow on the field, so a lot of people were expecting a sloppy game from both teams. But really, we got a sloppy game from one team and a blowout. I mean, when I tell you the score, you're not going to believe me, but the Patriots beat the Titans 59-0.
Where the ambulance? Why the man body still right there?
It is one of the biggest shutouts in NFL history, especially in the modern era. And in this game, the Titans, combined Kerry Collins and Vince Young, passed for -7 total yards.
Man, you capping!
Yes, you heard me correctly. Me and you guys sitting here watching this video passed for more yards than the Tennessee Titans on this day. Now, this was heading into their bye week, so they had a chance to fix things, and they finally decided to move on from Kerry Collins and make Vince Young the starter for the rest of the year. Now, I think Vince Young, over the years, he was a bust, but I don't really think it was his fault. He was drafted to a team in the Titans that had Jeff Fisher, who didn't really want Vince Young in the first place. That's why they got a veteran in Kerry Collins in 2006, and for a while it was, oh yeah, Vince Young's going to start in 07, and then in 08 he went back to Collins. And during this season, Collins started the season, and after an 0-6 start, Jeff Fisher, I guess, was just like, well, we got to make the move to Vince Young. He never really fully committed to Vince Young, and I think that's what kind of stunted his growth a little bit. But you got to admit, Vince Young was winning them games, as when they came out of the bye week, they won 5 games in a row to get their record to 5-6, and all of a sudden, back in the thick of things in the playoff race.
I didn't hear no bell.
They did have a hiccup against the undefeated Colts, losing by 10 points, but then wins over the Rams and the Dolphins had them at 7-7 going into their Christmas Day matchup against the San Diego Chargers. Now, the Chargers were a good team this year. They went 13-3. But with as red hot as the Titans were, you were kind of thinking maybe, just maybe, they can pull off an upset here, because at this point, if they win out, they could be in the playoffs. They could go from 0-6 to 9-7 and in the playoffs, and it would be one of the most historic turnarounds ever in an NFL season. But they got mollywopped by the Chargers and basically were eliminated from playoff contention then and there. They did kind of salvage the season, beating the lowly Seahawks the next week to finish the year 8-8, which is an accomplishment in itself to go from 0-6 to 8-8. But how did the Titans get here outside of a QB change? Because when you look at the first 6 weeks of the season, the defense was terrible. The lowest points they allowed in a game was 13 to the Steelers when they lost 13-10, and they had that 59-0 loss to the Patriots. But coming out of the bye week, they only allowed 20 or more points in 4 games and only 30 or more points in 1 game, that being that Chargers game. And sure, they weren't necessarily scoring a ton of points themselves, but they were finding a way to win a lot of the closer games that they weren't necessarily playing in the first portion, and they were able to make stops when they actually had to make stops. It was like all of a sudden Vince Young comes in at QB, plays pretty well, and the team plays better. Well, Vince Young wasn't necessarily the reason that they turned it around. I mean, he was part of the reason, but I don't know if you guys know this running back because he's kind of part of my generation. They had a running back in his second year by the name of Chris Johnson, who did come on in 2008 and did very well, took the starting job from Lindell White. And in 2009, he was their full-time running back. And let's just say he had an historic season. 2,006 rushing yards, 5.6 yards per carry, and had on over 500 receiving yards. The man had 2,500 receiving yards and made a Pro Bowl. He was just amazing. And it seemed like in the second half of the season, with the Titans playing closer games, they relied on him to make plays, and more often than not, he did make plays. Plus, putting Vince Young in, a guy who can run a little bit, kind of kept you on your heels because, hey, they got Chris Johnson, but also Vince Young can take off if he needs to. It's almost kind of like the Ravens with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry now. You can stack the box for Derrick Henry, but then you got to worry about Lamar, who can run the ball and throw the ball, so, you know, it's almost like pick your poison at that point. I'm not saying Chris Johnson had a good season because of Vince Young. I think it definitely did help him after Vince Young became the starter, because now teams have another threat to worry about in the run game. But as I mentioned before, it just seemed like Jeff Fisher never really wanted to fully commit to Vince Young, because he did the exact same thing the next year. I mean, the Titans started 5-2. They were doing just fine, but he moves Young out of the starting role again, puts Collins in, the team goes 6-10, and that's kind of when the rebuild of the Titans began, and Jeff Fisher would slowly make his way out. The reason I think a season like this will never happen again is because even though there's one more game to a season now, they play 17 games with 18 weeks as opposed to 16 games with 17 weeks, is because with the way the NFL currently is, teams that usually start out like this, you can start 0-2 and 0-3 and make the playoffs. Sure, I mean, we saw in 2018 the Houston Texans start 0-3, and they went 11-5, won their division, and made the playoffs. But with the way things work now, once teams start getting to 0-5 and 0-6, I don't really think they look at the playoffs. They start to build for the next season, and they kind of not necessarily do what it takes to lose, but I don't think they play as hard, and they don't go out there with the heart that the Titans did. Like the Titans after the bye week, after losing 59-0 and starting 0-6, could have easily said, no, we're done, the season's not going anywhere, let's just tank it away. But Jeff Fisher at least made the quarterback change to Vince Young, and it almost worked. So the moral of the story is never give up on the season, and if you need to make changes, make them, because Vince Young should have been the starter from the beginning. I mean, he got you to the playoffs in 2007, you abandoned him in 2008 after he got injured, and even this year when you started out with the older Kerry Collins, knowing that he wasn't necessarily in his prime, even though he did make the Pro Bowl in 2008, his numbers weren't anything stellar. It was just like Jeff Fisher didn't want to go to the future. He wanted to stay in the now, and that's kind of why he became a stagnant coach toward the end of his tenure in Tennessee and when he moved on to St. Louis. I'd really like to hear in the comments below what you guys think, especially Titans fans. What was this year like for you? Like, when you started out 0-6, was there any hope that you would fight it out for the playoffs, or were you just as surprised as everybody else that you kind of got back on track with Vince Young and almost made one of the biggest turnarounds during a season in NFL history? But until then, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you all in the next one.